It happened. I told you it was going to happen, and I said it was going to happen sometime in 2023. Canon just approved the first third-party lens with autofocus. So how long can we expect to see Tamron and Sigma producing third-party lenses approved for the platform? Details coming up, but first, please do me a favor. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe, share, choose all notifications, like, comment, and all that stuff. It's greatly appreciated, doesn't cost anything, and really helps this channel grow. At CP Plus earlier this year, French magazine Photo Trends interviewed the Canon development team about approval for third-party lenses, to which Canon said, "There have been many inquiries into third parties, and we have listened to their requests." Well, it seems like they certainly have been listening to their requests, but the Canon development team went on a little bit further and said this: "However, we do not have a direction or policy on this matter. I cannot give details, but if it is in line with our strategy, we will take the necessary measures on a case-by-case basis." I found it really strange that they didn't have a policy, but they had a strategy. I get a sense that there is a policy, it's just not written down. Anyhow, let's continue, because this is where we get the big punch. One example is the launch of Cosina's RF lens. The Cosina Voltlander 50mm f1 is the first third-party lens that can communicate directly with the body via the RF mount, and we are in talks with other manufacturers. And when I published a video saying that Canon has finally started approving third-party lenses, a lot of people got really happy, and maybe you were one of them. But many others said, "Come on, Simon, this is a manual focus lens. This doesn't mean that Canon's approved third-party lenses. We're just back to where we were, the cripple hammer in a very, very big way." But at that time, I said, well, hold on a minute here. This is very different because it is approved in previous manual focus third-party lenses, and I got a whole team of them here, so I'm familiar with them. You had a manual focus, but they couldn't communicate directly with the camera, so the communicating between the lens and the mount, you weren't getting anything. So quite often when you were setting it up, all you would see is a flashing F00, and you weren't able to communicate necessary information. Now we've got that EXIF data, and I thought that was a big step. Well, today at NAB 2023, or at the NAB show, we just got our first model third-party lens approved with autofocus. Pricing and availability aren't known at press time, but if you're at the NAB show here in Las Vegas, you can see it on display in their booth. Thank you, Meike. Well, thank you, Canon and Meike. So they obviously were able to work out one of those deals on a case-by-case basis. The Meike 85mm f1.4. It's approved by Canon. So now we have an example. Here we are in, what month are we in? We're in the middle of April, and we have a third-party lens approved by Canon where we have that EXIF data. We have the communication between the lens and the mount. This is a pretty big deal. This is good. We're starting to see progress. Now, I know what some are thinking, though, but what about Sigma and Tamron? What about 150mm to 600mm lens? What about other zooms? What about other possibilities? And I get it, like a 120 to 300mm instead of spending, what, $9,100 or $9,400 on the Canon RF 100 to 300mm f2.8 that hasn't been announced yet. I get it, I understand, but things are moving slowly. I don't understand why Canon doesn't have a policy on this, but I think they're trying to get the best possible deal for themselves. I don't know what the deals are that they're signing with Cosina, what they're signing with Meike. What I do know is that we are slowly starting to see approvals, and I said, based on the fallout that we saw last year, that probably sometime in 2023 we would start to see approvals, and we saw the Cosina, and that happened at CP Plus, and now we're seeing the Meike here at the NAB show. And that's a pretty big deal. I think this, I'm starting to smile a little bit because what I'm seeing here is that we're starting to see the cracks develop. We're starting to see Canon open up, and it looks like if this continues, if we see Sigma and Tamron, then yes, Canon was trying to protect their intellectual property. I've got a whole bunch of third-party lenses here. Like, I've got a ton of them. If I had my glasses on, I could tell you what each one of these are. There's some really, really terrific lenses here. And I use this one, if I can read it here. Even the one problem with some of these really small lenses is, even with glasses in low light like I'm shooting here, it's really hard to read and understand. So the lettering, I can't quite read who that is. And this one here is Pergear. And really, really tiny lenses. They work really well. I've had a lot of fun shooting with them and testing them, and I've reviewed them on this channel. But yeah, not having the EXIF data was one thing I wish it had. I didn't mind that they didn't have autofocus, especially if I'm shooting the stars, because a lot of times you're pulling the focus manually anyway. So as we start to see other focal lengths, such as the Meike 85mm f1.4 with a 77mm thread, yeah, this starts to excite me, because yes, you do need autofocus. 50mm, we need autofocus. Or even a general purpose lens, or even telephoto lenses. It's nice to have a really good solid autofocus system. So yeah, I'm getting pretty excited. But what do you think? Are you excited by this, or are you still kind of going, yeah, I don't know about this? I understand. Once we see Sigma and Tamron, then it really doesn't matter, because these are two big companies that have been producing lenses for the camera industry for many, many years. They produced a lot of lenses for the FE mount, for the EF mount, for the Z mount, for the F mount. This is pretty exciting. I'm pretty happy to be able to report this news here at the NAB show 2023. And I was expecting, for NAB, I was expecting to get a bunch of Canon cinema lenses announced at this show. We were expecting something in the weeks leading up to that, and we didn't receive anything. But a source has told me that Canon is planning on announcing some cinema lenses. They're just not planning on doing it at NAB, but in a show coming up shortly thereafter. And this is something that Canon has done before. They don't always announce things at NAB. Sometimes they do it at a follow-up show. They're trying to spread all the love around. So yeah, I'm just pretty excited by this. Let me just check to see the lens embodiments, anything else of noteworthy here. Aperture, yeah, f1.4, 12 blades. It does have a switch for autofocus, manual focus, so that's good. And they're making it for not just the RF mount, but for the E, Z, and L mount. The L Mount Alliance. I know, I did that terribly. I'm no fro, right? I don't have the hair. In fact, my hair this morning is terrible. I've got some sort of wardrobe malfunction going on up here. Full frame, 85mm. Yeah, the only thing we don't know is the price and when it's going to be available. But if you are at the NAB show 2023, well, go ahead and check them out, because they have it in their booth. Kind of reminds me of the Holy Grail, that movie where they had the light shining down on the Grail, because that's what it feels like. This is a step in the right direction. So we had our first lens without autofocus. Now we have our first lens with autofocus with a completely different company. I don't know, maybe by the next show we'll have another announcement, but I'm kind of like you. I'm waiting to see Sigma and Tamron being announced. They produce an awful lot of really good lenses that photographers really love. And they've started producing lenses for videographers that don't have really noisy focus motors. That's me. I purchased the Canon RF 50mm f1.2, upgrading after the EF version. And one thing I wasn't pleasantly surprised by is the focus motor is louder in this lens, and it's picked up by a shotgun mic on top, whereas the EF version wasn't. So yeah, but either way, for my channel, for what I'm doing here, the 50mm f1.2 is terrific. I'm looking forward to seeing what Sigma and Tamron might come out with, especially some wide, fast lenses. Like, would they bring a 100 to 300mm f2.8 out? And how, in terms of sharpness and detail, would it be compared to Canon's imminent release? Something just fell off my table. The imminent release of the Canon RF 100 300mm f2.8 L series image stabilized USM. I know that at $9,000, I know that's pretty expensive for this, and you might think that there isn't a lot of demand for it, but every video I put out on this lens has done very, very well, almost 5 times more traffic than the RF 35mm prime, the f1.2. So there's definitely a lot of interest in this. If you're covering hockey, if you're covering basketball, if you're covering any indoor sport, such as the upcoming Olympics, as somebody suggested, this might start the parade of products and services coming out by Canon in the lead up to the Paris Olympics next year. And yeah, I agree. F2.8, 100 to 300mm is perfect for shooting any sort of indoor sports where you're in a rather small venue. I think this is a really terrific lens. Outdoors, no, I wouldn't use it. I would get the 100 to 500mm. It's a whole lot cheaper. It's an f4.5 to 7.1, and it works perfectly well for outdoors, and it's got a larger reach. But for indoors, yeah, that 100 to 300. So if Sigma and Tamron could come out with one of those, I'm sure they've got to be in discussion with Canon. I wonder if Canon has something in there that just makes it a little bit difficult for these companies to accept. But we've already had 2 other companies say, yeah, we're on board. Cosina and now Meike. They're on board. They're okay with it. So I can't imagine with Sigma and Tamron's weight as being such large companies that they can't work out a deal with Canon. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Canon said, okay, you can't touch these focal lengths I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But from what we've seen with Meike here and Cosina, they're not saying, no, you can't do anything fast and wide open, like a fast aperture of 1.2, 1.4, 1.8, anything like that. I just wonder, because it's rumored that Nikon has put in some restrictions saying, no, you can't do these focal lengths or you can't do these types of lenses. So we'll just have to wait and see. But if you want to stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors, specifically the third-party approval, more companies that are getting approved, well then you know where to come to. But do me a favor, subscribe and choose all notifications. Subscribing really helps this channel out. And by choosing all notifications, as soon as I publish a new video like this one here, well then you'll get notified of all the latest news and information coming out. You'll get sent an email. Just check your spam and junk mail folder. And I suggest you stick around for around 10 o'clock today because I got another special video coming out, especially if you're a Sony customer. So lots of news coming out. And if you're interested in all the minor news as well, then follow me on my Twitter page because any sort of news or rumors that come out that aren't big enough to have their own separate video, well, I post them there on my Twitter channel. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.